My wife started coming home later than usual. The lie fell apart when our daughter asked one question. Aaron Whitmore had learned to measure time by routines rather than clocks, by whether dinner was still warm when everyone sat down, by whether his wife's car was in the driveway before the kids finished their homework, by the small, dependable signs that told him the day had unfolded the way it usually did. Lately, those signs had shifted just enough to make him notice without giving him anything solid to hold onto. Claire started coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, not with excuses that sounded invented, but late enough that the kids were already in pajamas when she arrived. Late enough that she kissed their foreheads in the hallway instead of at the table. Late enough that Aaron found himself reheating food he'd once assumed they'd eat together. She explained it easily, talking about errands that took longer than expected, unexpected conversations, things that didn't sound alarming because they were vague rather than wrong. Aaron accepted those explanations because he wanted to, because life with two children left little room for paranoia, and because Claire still laughed at the right moments and remembered appointments and sent reminders about school projects as if nothing had changed. Their daughter, Hannah, was 9 and observant in the way children became when adults stopped narrating their own behavior, and their son, Lucas, was 6 and still trusting enough to believe whatever made it into his bedtime story. Aaron noticed Hannah watching the door in the evenings, listening for the sound of tires on gravel, and when he asked what she was waiting for, she shrugged and said she liked knowing when everyone was home. One Tuesday night, Claire didn't come back until after 10. Aaron had already read to Lucas and tucked him in, had already listened to Hannah explain a problem she didn't understand and then drift off mid-sentence. When Claire finally walked in, she looked alert rather than tired, her coat buttoned carefully, her phone slipping into her bag as soon as she crossed the threshold. She apologized for missing bedtime, kissed Aaron lightly, and went straight to the shower, leaving the faint smell of a place that wasn't their house hanging in the hallway. Aaron told himself it meant nothing. The following week followed the same pattern: late arrivals, brief apologies, a promise to slow down once things settled, though nothing specific was ever named as the cause of the rush. Aaron adjusted without realizing he was doing it, packing leftovers, managing mornings alone, answering Hannah's questions with practiced calm. On Friday, as he was helping Lucas with his shoes, Hannah stood in the doorway holding her backpack, watching him with an intensity that didn't fit her age. She asked if Mom was working more now. Aaron said not really, just busy. Hannah nodded, then asked why Mom's car sometimes stayed somewhere else overnight if she wasn't working late. Aaron froze with one shoe in his hand, the question landing heavier because of how casually it was asked, because Hannah wasn't accusing, just trying to reconcile something she had already seen. He asked what she meant, keeping his voice even, and Hannah said she woke up once when Mom wasn't home yet and saw her car parked on a different street when they drove to school the next morning, like it had slept somewhere else. Aaron told her there was probably a simple explanation and finished tying Lucas's shoe, aware that explanations had a way of sounding hollow once children noticed patterns adults pretended not to see. That night, when Claire came home at a reasonable hour, Aaron watched her more closely than he ever had, noticing how she avoided sitting down for long, how she checked her phone when she thought he wasn't looking, how she spoke quickly about ordinary things as if filling space mattered. After the kids were asleep, Aaron asked, gently, whether anything had changed that he should know about. Claire smiled, said no, said she was just juggling things, said she appreciated him being patient. The words were right, but the timing felt rehearsed. Over the next days, Aaron began paying attention in ways he never had before, not searching through devices or confronting anyone, just noticing. He noticed the nights she didn't charge her phone on the nightstand anymore, the mornings she left earlier than necessary, the way she deflected when Hannah asked direct questions. He noticed Lucas clinging to him longer at bedtime, as if sensing that evenings had become unpredictable. One afternoon, while cleaning out the car to make room for a school project, Aaron found a receipt tucked into the side pocket, crumpled and forgotten. From a cafe across town he knew Claire liked but never visited after dark. The time stamp was late, well past when she'd said she was heading home. He folded the receipt and put it back, not ready to decide what it meant. That evening, Hannah asked to stay up a little longer, saying she wanted to wait for Mom. When Claire didn't arrive on time, Hannah turned to Aaron and asked, quietly and without drama, whether Mom was late because she was with the same person as before. Aaron asked who she meant, already knowing the question he was afraid to hear. Hannah said the man she'd seen once when Mom thought she was asleep, the one who waved from the driver's seat when Mom got out of another car and told her not to tell because it was a surprise. Aaron felt the room tilt slightly, not from anger yet, but from the sudden clarity that children didn't invent details to fill silence. They repeated what adults failed to hide. Claire came home minutes later, smiling as she set her keys down, unaware that the lie she'd been managing quietly had just been named out loud. And Aaron realized as he watched her that the question Hannah had asked wasn't the beginning of his doubt. It was the end of his ability to ignore it. And whatever came next would force him to choose between protecting the story Claire wanted to tell and protecting the reality his children were already trying to understand. Aaron didn't confront Claire that night, not because he lacked courage, but because he understood something had shifted the moment Hannah put words to what had been hiding in plain sight. And reacting too quickly would only teach his children that uncomfortable truths were dangerous to acknowledge. He tucked Hannah into bed himself, listening as she asked whether surprises were still surprises if they made people lie, and he answered carefully, telling her that surprises were meant to make people happy, not confused. She nodded, accepting that distinction with a seriousness that made his chest tighten. Claire moved through the house afterward with an ease that now felt deliberate, chatting about mundane things, asking Aaron if he'd paid a bill, laughing at a joke Lucas told from his room, performing normalcy with enough confidence that it might have worked if not for the residue of Hannah's question still hanging in the air. When Claire finally sat beside Aaron on the couch and rested her head on his shoulder, he felt how practiced the gesture had become, familiar enough to seem sincere while avoiding the one thing he needed most, which was eye contact. He asked again, softly, whether there was anything she wanted to tell him, framing it as an invitation rather than an accusation, and Claire answered by listing responsibilities, schedules, the weight of managing a household, everything except the name of the man Hannah had described so precisely. Aaron didn't push. He went to bed early, leaving Claire awake with her phone, and lay there listening to the house settle, realizing that the quiet he once trusted now felt curated. The next morning, Aaron altered his routine slightly, offering to take the kids to school even though Claire did drop off on Wednesdays. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before agreeing, and that hesitation told him more than any denial could. On the drive, Hannah sat quietly in the back seat, watching the streets pass, and when they stopped at a light near a residential area she didn't usually see in the mornings, she pointed out a gray sedan parked near a townhouse and said that was the car, the one Mom had gotten out of. Aaron kept his eyes on the road and nodded, asking when she'd seen it before. Hannah said once after dinner, when Mom said she needed to run an errand and came back smelling different, like the cafe near the park. Aaron thanked her for telling him and didn't ask anything else, aware that pushing for more details would only make her feel responsible for adult decisions. That afternoon, Aaron drove past the townhouse on his way home from work, not to spy, but to verify that it existed outside of a child's memory. And when he saw Claire's car parked along the curb, his body reacted before his mind did, hands tightening on the wheel, breath catching in a way that surprised him. He didn't stop. He drove on, knowing that what mattered now wasn't catching anyone in the act, but understanding the shape of the lie he was standing inside. That evening, Claire came home at the usual late hour, cheerful and distracted, kissing the kids quickly before retreating to the bedroom to change. Aaron served dinner, listened to Lucas describe his day, and watched Hannah eat slowly, glancing toward the hallway whenever Claire moved out of sight. After the kids were asleep, Aaron told Claire he'd driven through the neighborhood Hannah mentioned. Claire froze mid-step, then recovered, laughing lightly and saying children mix things up all the time. Aaron said nothing, just looked at her long enough for the smile to falter. She asked him what he was implying, and he replied that he was trying to understand why their daughter had been told not to tell him something that involved another man. Claire's face tightened, and she accused Aaron of dragging the kids into adult misunderstandings, of letting imagination spiral into suspicion, of undermining trust by listening too closely to a child's half-formed perceptions. Aaron told her Hannah hadn't imagined the car, the cafe, or the warning to keep quiet. The room went still, and for the first time, Claire didn't reach for a counter-argument immediately. She said the man was a friend who'd helped her think through things, that nothing inappropriate had happened, that Hannah had misunderstood a goodbye. Aaron asked why thinking required secrecy and late nights, and Claire answered by reminding him how judgmental people could be, how rumors destroyed families faster than truth ever did, how important it was to keep appearances stable for the kids. Aaron realized then that Claire wasn't afraid of hurting him, she was afraid of losing control of the narrative. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Claire's sister called to suggest Aaron was overreacting, that marriages went through phases and discretion mattered. A mutual friend dropped by unexpectedly with concern that sounded rehearsed, asking if everything was okay at home. Aaron felt the circle tighten, the story being managed without his consent. He began documenting quietly, not to weaponize, but to keep his footing, noting dates, times, small inconsistencies that piled up into something undeniable. One evening, as he was sorting through old photos on the shared cloud to find a school picture, Aaron found a short video clip uploaded accidentally, filmed from inside a car, showing Claire laughing in the passenger seat, the reflection of a man's hand on the steering wheel visible in the window, and Claire's voice saying, softly but clearly, that she needed to be careful because her husband was starting to notice patterns. Aaron saved the clip and shut the tablet off as footsteps approached from the hallway, realizing that the lie hadn't just involved secrecy, it had involved planning, and that the moment Claire understood he now had proof, she would stop explaining and start acting. Aaron didn't tell Claire about the video right away, choosing instead to let the knowledge settle into something usable rather than explosive, because he understood now that every reaction would teach his children what truth was allowed to look like in their home. He focused on structure, on things that couldn't be argued away, picking the kids up on time, cooking meals that landed on the table when promised, answering questions directly without offering conclusions. Claire noticed the change immediately, mistaking calm for surrender, and began speaking more freely about her days, about how she was meeting people who understood her, about how sometimes marriages grew narrow without anyone meaning for that to happen. Aaron listened without interrupting, registering how easily she spoke about growth when it happened elsewhere. Hannah grew quieter, choosing her words carefully, and one afternoon asked Aaron whether it was wrong to keep secrets if they stopped people from fighting. He told her that secrets had weight, and someone always ended up carrying it, and she nodded like someone who already knew who that person was. That evening, Aaron met his brother after work, not to unload everything, but to say just enough to ground himself in someone who wasn't invested in managing appearances. His brother listened, asked a few precise questions, and told him to document everything and protect the kids first, reminding him that silence didn't freeze a situation, it let other people move faster. When Aaron returned home, he found Claire in the kitchen speaking in a lowered voice on the phone, stopping abruptly when she noticed him. She smiled, asked how his day had been, and he answered honestly, saying it had been clarifying. She stiffened at the word and changed the subject, offering to handle school pickup the next day, an offer that sounded cooperative until Aaron declined and saw frustration flicker across her face. The following morning, Aaron took the kids to school and watched Hannah walk inside without looking back, a small change that said more than questions ever had. On his way to work, he received a message from an unfamiliar number saying Claire was having a hard time and that Aaron should consider how stress could make situations look worse than they were. He recognized the tone immediately, the careful language of someone enlisted to apply pressure without appearing involved, and chose not to reply. That afternoon, Claire didn't come home at all. She texted late, saying she needed space and would stay with a friend, promising the kids it was temporary. Aaron didn't correct her in front of them. He tucked Lucas in while answering his questions about whether mom was mad, explaining that adults sometimes made choices that confused even themselves. Hannah asked where the friend lived, and Aaron said he didn't know yet. After the kids were asleep, Aaron opened the tablet again and reviewed the video, noting the date and time, then cross-referencing it with bank records that showed charges near the cafe Hannah had mentioned. He printed everything and placed it in a folder he kept out of sight, not as a threat, but as a boundary against gaslighting. The next day, the school called Aaron because Claire had tried to sign Lucas out early without prior notice, and when Aaron asked why, the office said she'd seemed rushed and upset. He drove to the school and picked Lucas up himself, finding Claire waiting in the parking lot, eyes red, insisting she'd been misunderstood. Aaron told her they would talk later, and she accused him of humiliating her in public, of turning simple miscommunications into power plays. He didn't engage, focusing instead on Lucas's questions about whether mom was still coming to his game. That night, Claire returned home unannounced, moving through the house as if reclaiming territory, hugging the kids tightly, speaking loudly about dinner plans and schedules, trying to reset the frame by force. When the kids were finally in bed, Aaron told her he'd seen the video. She laughed reflexively, then stopped when he described it without showing it, naming the cafe, the words she'd used, the way she'd spoken about him, noticing patterns. Her face drained of color, and she asked who else had it, how long he'd had it, whether he'd shown anyone. Aaron said none of that mattered as much as the fact that she'd planned around him rather than talked to him. Claire's voice rose, accusing him of spying, of trapping her, of turning a friendship into a criminal case, then dropped suddenly as she asked him not to ruin everything, not to tell people who would judge her forever, not to involve the kids any more than he already had. Aaron told her the kids were already involved the moment she asked one of them to keep quiet. Claire stared at him as if recalibrating, then said if he forced this into the open, she would make sure everyone knew he was controlling, inattentive, the kind of husband who pushed his wife away without noticing. Aaron realized then that she wasn't asking for forgiveness, she was negotiating leverage, and as she picked up her phone to make a call he couldn't hear, he understood that whatever came next wouldn't be about truth or reconciliation. It would be about who reached the outside world first. Aaron understood by the next morning that Claire had begun moving pieces without telling him, not in obvious ways, but through the quiet channels that carried the most weight. Once they started whispering, his sister-in-law called first, speaking gently about concern, about how Claire was struggling, about how Aaron's distance might be making things worse for the kids. And Aaron listened without interrupting, noting how quickly the story had shifted from secrecy to sympathy. At school pickup, another parent asked if everything was okay at home because Claire had seemed overwhelmed lately, and Aaron realized the groundwork had been laid for a version of events where concern replaced accountability. He kept the kids' routine intact, took Lucas to practice, helped Hannah with homework, and watched her hesitate before asking whether mom would be coming to the school open house, as if bracing for an answer that might change again. That evening, Claire returned with a firmness that suggested resolve rather than remorse, saying she'd spoken to a counselor, to her sister, to someone who understood how misunderstandings escalated when people felt watched. Aaron asked whether any of those conversations included telling the truth, and Claire responded by accusing him of collecting evidence like a prosecutor instead of acting like a husband. She said he turned a personal situation into something cold and procedural, ignoring how much pressure she'd been under. Aaron told her pressure didn't explain asking their daughter to keep secrets or planning conversations around his absence. And Claire snapped that Hannah shouldn't have been paying attention in the first place, that children saw what they wanted to see when parents failed them. The words landed hard, and Aaron saw Hannah freeze in the doorway, having come downstairs for water. Claire didn't notice right away. Aaron sent Hannah back to bed gently and followed Claire into the kitchen, telling her that blaming a child for noticing was the line he wouldn't allow her to cross. Claire softened then, but only briefly, apologizing in a way that slid past responsibility, saying she never meant to involve Hannah, that things had just gotten complicated. Aaron asked if she planned to end it, and Claire avoided the question, talking instead about how sudden changes could destabilize the kids and how careful timing mattered. Aaron told her that continuing the lie was the destabilizing part, and Claire replied that he was being idealistic about truth and naive about consequences. The next day, Aaron received an email from Claire's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss boundaries and communication expectations, and he felt the shift move from emotional to formal. He met his own attorney that afternoon, walking through the timeline, the video, the messages, the school call, and left with a clearer sense of how narratives hardened once paperwork began. When he returned home, Claire had already told the kids that Mom and Dad were working through things, emphasizing togetherness while packing a bag in the background. Hannah watched quietly, and later asked Aaron whether working through things meant people stopped lying. Aaron told her that was the goal, and she nodded like someone filing the answer away for later. That night, Claire asked Aaron to sign a temporary agreement about schedules just until things cooled down, and when he refused without reviewing it, she accused him of escalating again, warning him that if he didn't cooperate, she'd tell people he was trying to control access to the kids. Aaron realized then that Claire's strategy relied on speed and perception, not resolution. He didn't argue. He went to bed early, knowing the next days would be about documentation rather than discussion. The hook came quietly, the way the most consequential things often did. When Aaron received a forwarded email from the school counselor addressed mistakenly to both parents, noting that Hannah had expressed anxiety about being asked to keep secrets and recommending a meeting to ensure consistency at home, and as Aaron read it, he understood that the story was no longer confined to their walls, and that Claire's next move would determine whether this became a private reckoning or something that followed them into rooms where neither of them controlled the outcome. Asterisk. The meeting with the school counselor became the moment Aaron had been preparing for without fully naming it, not because it promised justice, but because it forced everyone to speak in a space where performance mattered less than consistency. Claire arrived composed, speaking softly about stress and misunderstandings, framing late nights as moments of personal reflection that had been misread, emphasizing how deeply she cared about protecting the children from adult conflict. Aaron didn't interrupt. When it was his turn, he spoke about routines, about questions Hannah had asked without prompting, about the weight of being asked to keep quiet about things she didn't understand, and the counselor listened closely, asking Claire directly whether she had ever asked Hannah not to share something with her father. Claire hesitated just long enough to be noticed before saying she might have asked for discretion to avoid unnecessary worrying. And in that pause, Aaron felt the shift happen, the subtle recognition that avoidance wasn't the same as care. The counselor recommended individual sessions for Hannah and a temporary adjustment to routines to reduce instability. And while it wasn't a ruling, it was a record, one that didn't bend to intention. Afterward, Claire accused Aaron of turning the school into a courtroom, of humiliating her in front of professionals who would now see her differently. Aaron replied that he hadn't chosen the setting. He just stopped preventing the truth from arriving there. The legal steps followed quickly, not dramatically, but relentlessly. Temporary custody schedules were outlined, communication moved to written channels, and Claire's late return stopped abruptly, replaced by carefully timed appearances that felt staged rather than present. The man from the gray sedan never appeared again. Not at the house, not at school events, not in the margins where secrets once lived. And Aaron understood that disappearance wasn't proof of remorse, only of risk management. The kids adjusted unevenly. Lucas asked fewer questions and clung to predictability, counting days and reminding Aaron of plans, while Hannah began speaking more freely in therapy, naming confusion without trying to solve it for adults. When the custody hearing arrived, Aaron didn't argue character or morality. He presented patterns, dates, messages, the video, the counselor's notes, and the judge asked Claire why secrecy had seemed safer than honesty. Claire spoke about fear, about losing stability, about being judged, and for the first time she sounded less strategic and more exposed. But exposure didn't undo choices. The ruling emphasized structure, consistency, and reduced flexibility, prioritizing what the children had already shown they needed. Outside the courthouse, Claire told Aaron he'd won, and he corrected her, saying the kids had. In the months that followed, life didn't become easier, but it became clearer. Hannah stopped scanning the driveway at night. Lucas slept through games without asking who was coming, and Aaron learned that trust wasn't rebuilt through promises, but through the absence of needing to explain. The moral didn't arrive as a speech or an apology. It settled in the quiet understanding that lies told for comfort always demand a witness, and often that witness is a child. Claire remained in their lives as a parent, but the version of control she'd relied on no longer worked in daylight. Aaron realized that protecting reality, even when it fractured appearances, gave his children something sturdier than reassurance ever could, and that sometimes the most loving thing a parent could do was refuse to let confusion masquerade as peace.